Hello everybody, how are we all doing? It is incredibly cold today. I am absolutely freezing, but I have put on my lovely fake silk shirt because A, I wanted to look nice in the video, and B, I wanted to slightly pretend I was a little bit richer than I am, because that's the key for today's video. Have you not already guessed by the title? We are going to be talking about Saltburn. Now, this has been obviously absolutely blowing up across the internet due to those two scenes. Now, if you've seen the film, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the film Saltburn, I would highly recommend you watch it and then come back to my video, because there are going to be spoilers in the plot, and also just generally you need to know what I'm talking about before we kind of discuss it. So if you haven't seen it, please do go and watch it. Now, there's a lot of different kind of content being made about Saltburn at the moment. There's content about those scenes. There's content about kind of all the different kind of references in it and the Easter eggs and this kind of thing. I wanted to kind of discuss the literary side of Saltburn, because the director and writer Emerald Fennel has put quite a lot of literary references into the film, and just generally within the setting, within the plot, within the characters. And obviously it is set at a country house, so I kind of had to do a video about it as well, just for that reason, because it's not a period drama, but it's set in the early noughties, so it's set in the past. So I guess if you really wanted to push, you could call it a period drama. But as someone who was born in the 80s, I'm not quite sure I'm ready for calling early noughties period yet. So it's not quite in the same vein as period dramas that I review, but with it being a film about country houses and with so many literary influences, I wanted to review it and to discuss some of those kind of literary influences and how I think they make this a really beautiful and unique film. So, without further ado, I'm not going to talk too much about the overall plot and what I thought of it. Safe to say, it is a very weird film, and there are those two moments where I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. I almost switched the film off, but I didn't. I kept watching. I knew there were a couple of moments that were like, ooh, so I just tried to get through them as fast as I could. I did actually film a reaction of me watching Saltburn. So I would use the next footage, I think it's about a minute, use the next minute's worth of footage as my kind of visual overview and review of Saltburn. So here you go.
So kind, you're a fucking lifesaver, really. Well, Dad, you know, got so guilty about the whole thing that.
Oh, fuck. No! Can you get his dick out? What? This is really fucking weird. Apparently that was improvised as well. Hello there, what are you doing? It was all a ruse, it was all the plan, puss. Well, weird. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Like I say, other than those two moments, I thought overall the film was very good and weird and made you have like a visceral reaction, which is always great with films these days, because we become so desensitized to general content that it's great when a film or a book or just some kind of artistic content like that gives you a real visceral reaction. So as uncomfortable as it made me, I did also think it was pretty great as well overall as a film. So, moving on, there are quite a few literary references in Saltburn, and so I wanted to kind of just look at them and discuss them briefly. I'm going to try and keep this video quite short, so if you want to talk about any of the literary references in more detail, if you'd like me to do like a more detailed Saltburn video about specific parts of it, then do let me know. Otherwise, this is just going to be a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of all the fantastic literary content in the film. So yes, let's move on to the literary references. Okay, so the very first literary influence, which to be honest I spotted even before that I watched the film, like just looking at some of the trailer content and some of the bits and pieces online before I watched Saltburn, I absolutely knew that Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh would be a huge influence on this film. And I will be honest, I thought initially that Saltburn was going to be like a modern adaptation of Brideshead Revisited. It's not, it's more of that Brideshead Revisited kind of influenced Saltburn. It's kind of, you can see the inspirations there. You can see a couple of parallels to the book, which I'll go on to talk about in a second, but it's not a straight kind of copy or reworking or adaptation of that book. So if you don't know, Brideshead Revisited is the story of the character of Charles, who befriends Lord Sebastian Flight when they are both at Oxford together. And Lord Sebastian is the son of, I think, the Marquis of Marchmain. God, that's hard to say. The Marquis of Marchmain, I think, is his name, his made-up title in the book. And Lord Sebastian is a son, so he's called Lord Sebastian because he's the son of a marquis. Very similar to the main character of Felix, although I don't think they ever call him Lord Felix or that, like, the Right Honourable Felix, which you would say to like somebody who is planning to become a duke when they inherit off their father. So I'm not sure if he's titled, although there is a line where I think Farley or somebody says all you need is a title and a palatial manor or something. So he might be. It's meant to come across as being very similar. And Charles Ryder, the main character of Brideshead Revisited, is from a very different background, more kind of working class, as opposed to Sebastian, who's obviously in the very upper class, the gentry. And it's about kind of their experiences as friends. Sebastian invites Charles to come to his family seat, which is Brideshead. And the title Brideshead Revisited comes because the book starts with the Second World War and Charles Ryder is returning to Brideshead with the army during the war, and then he's kind of remembering all of his memories from the past of when he was there with Sebastian and the rest of the Marchmain family. So immediately there are some very obvious parallels with Saltburn. Obviously we've got Felix, who is the son of a very wealthy lord, and he lives at Saltburn, which is his family's palatial kind of family seat in the country, and that's very similar to Brideshead. We've got the character of Oliver in Saltburn, who leads us to believe for the majority of the film that he is from a working class background in Liverpool, and then you've obviously got Felix, who's very, very wealthy, and Felix and Oliver meet at Oxford when they are there studying together. So there's some very kind of obvious parallels. Now, where Brideshead kind of divulges away from Saltburn is, I suppose, the dark, like thriller undertones of Saltburn versus Brideshead. In Brideshead, there is a couple of parallels in that Sebastian and Charles end up kind of parting ways. Charles does have an affair with Sebastian's sister Julia, in the same way that Oliver has a very brief fling with Venetia in Saltburn. But Brideshead doesn't end up in any way kind of dark and gothic and thriller and psychological in the same way that Saltburn does. But like I say, it is probably one of the most obvious parallels to draw in Saltburn. And Emerald Fennel did talk about the fact that she wanted the film to be kind of like a dark gothic version of a country house genre film. And that's very much what she's got here, is that type of genre with heavy influences from Brideshead Revisited. So yes, have you read Brideshead Revisited? What do you think? And are there any other parallels between Brideshead and Saltburn that I've missed? Because other than the obvious kind of the character setup and the, I suppose, the introductory plot, I don't see much more. Especially it kind of divulges at the point when Charles tries to get hold of the Marchmain family fortune through marrying Julia, but it doesn't happen. Whereas obviously in Saltburn, Oliver does end up getting hold of the family fortune and the family estate at the end. So for me, it's almost like if Brideshead Revisited is a light version of that narrative, then Saltburn is kind of like the darker twin. So yeah, let me know what you think of that. The other really obvious literary, or I suppose kind of film influence, is the film The Talented Mr. Ripley. Now, this is very different in terms of plot because obviously The Talented Mr. Ripley is set on the Italian Riviera. It's in Europe, so it's not and it's not like a country estate or anything like that. It's in these beautiful kind of seaside Italian towns, but the storyline, the characters, and I suppose the kind of more towards the end of the narrative is very similar to Saltburn. So you have the characters of Tom, which is played by Matt Damon, and Dickie, which is played by Jude Law, and their characters are very similar to Felix and Oliver in Saltburn in that Tom Ripley is trying to ingratiate himself into a more affluent family's lifestyle. Obviously, these are American characters. It's very much kind of American wealth, whereas Saltburn is British wealth. It's kind of UK wealth. But it's so similar that I think a lot of people have been drawing a lot of parallels between this. The whole idea is that Ripley is sent over to Europe to recover Dickie, to bring him back to the US by Dickie's father, and Dickie's father accidentally believes that Ripley has been to Princeton with his son Dickie, and so there's that kind of university connection there between the two characters, Ripley and Dickie, and the belief that they are old university chums. So that's very similar to Saltburn. Obviously, that starts in the university setting and then moves away. The Talented Mr. Ripley doesn't start in a university setting, but it's got that kind of a university academic tie right at the beginning of the narrative. Where I feel like Saltburn and The Talented Mr. Ripley really cross over is at the point that the obsession really starts, because whilst in Brideshead Revisited, I feel like Charles Ryder is really kind of like desperate and has a big desire to be part of the Marchmain family. You don't get that level of kind of obsession, like all-consuming, destructive, willing to kind of kill people obsession that you obviously do get with Saltburn and with The Talented Mr. Ripley. So obviously we know that Dickie's character dies. We know that Dickie's friend, I can't remember his name. I can only think Farley from Saltburn, but it's the Farley parallel character. So where in Saltburn, Felix has Farley as his kind of like, well, it's his cousin, but the friend that looks down on the lower class person, there is that character in The Talented Mr. Ripley as well, Dickie's friend, who I can't remember his name, who is Dickie's friend who looks down on Ryder's character. So that's an immediate parallel. And then we've also got the fact that he dies. I mean, he doesn't die in Saltburn, but Oliver gets rid of him in the same way. So there's a lot of kind of similar parallels. Now, again, it has been many years since I watched The Talented Mr. Ripley, so there might be a couple of extra little bits that I've missed there. But I feel like if we were talking about Brideshead Revisited being the kind of lighter influence, I do feel like The Talented Mr. Ripley was definitely the darker influence. A lot of that kind of obsession narrative has been influenced by this film, and that kind of the willingness to go as far as you need to go in order to meet your ends, I think is really, really interesting. And that kind of, I love the idea of a flawed main character. And I just feel like it puts the reader or the viewer through such an emotional roller coaster, because you start the film off and you're obviously on this main character's side, which we generally most of the time do start off on the side, or we're usually on the side of the main character. Even in films like American Psycho, where Christian Bale is literally a murderer, you're kind of on his side as well. It's that whole thing about a protagonist. You're always supposed to be on the side of the protagonist. But then as Oliver goes into this more and more kind of deranged behaviour, you start really finding yourself appalled and horrified by him, and then kind of horrified yourself that you liked him to start with. And that's the same with The Talented Mr. Ripley. It has that same kind of process for people who watch Saltburn that people who watch Talented Mr. Ripley as well. You kind of, by the end, you almost want that character to get their comeuppance, and when they don't, it's another kind of emotional roller coaster as well. So that's where I see a lot of the Talented Mr. Ripley parallels in and amongst this. So the other huge, very visual and very obvious literary reference is A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare, and the party that happens at Saltburn for Oliver's birthday. Now, like I said, this is more of a visual nod rather than kind of a storyline or a plotting nod, but there are a couple of little plot hints and little kind of nods to A Midsummer Night's Dream that are within the plot and within the characters, but generally very visually you can tell almost immediately that the party for Oliver's birthday is supposed to be a Shakespearean kind of reference, because you have Oliver himself, who is dressed up in little deer antlers. He's dressed up as Puck, the character, who is the servant of Lord Oberon, who is the king of the fairies, and Felix is dressed in these beautiful gold iridescent fairy wings. So that visually very much kind of sets them as the lord and the servant kind of role, which is obviously supposed to be kind of the role of Oliver and Felix throughout Saltburn. So there's that kind of very obvious reference. Richard E. Grant's character, who is just absolutely brilliant, he dresses up in a suit of armour, which I know I shouldn't say that that's life goals, but honestly, to have a suit of armour that then you can dress up in for parties is something, I'm not going to lie, I actually would really like to have. Probably doesn't surprise Tom or my sister or anybody who knows me very well, to be honest. But yes, he dresses up in a suit of armour, and that is supposed to signify that he is dressing up as Theseus. And Theseus is the character who battles the Minotaur, and that kind of ties in quite nicely to the fact that in the maze we have the Minotaur statue, which is in the centre of the maze, where Felix obviously eventually is found dead. And the kind of references go even deeper, really. And this is where the kind of A Midsummer Night's Dream starts to kind of blend over with Greek mythology. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because I want to talk about Greek mythology separately. But yes, there's that kind of link between the Greek mythology and the Minotaur and Theseus as well from A Midsummer Night's Dream. And one thing that I thought was really beautiful as A Midsummer Night's Dream kind of reference, which I'm not sure if it was intentional, but I like to think it was, is Oliver's jacket that he wears. So he wears this kind of white embroidered leather, I think it looks leather, or is it denim? It's a white jacket anyway, and it's embroidered with flowers. And that to me was just such a beautiful nod to kind of the garden in Midsummer Night's Dream and the kind of beautiful floral kind of surrounding that we all think of when we think of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And there's also the character of Farley, who we've already mentioned, who literally dresses up as Bottom for the party. We see him kind of come into shot in a horse's head outfit. And in the plot of Saltburn, that's supposed to be so that Farley can kind of sneak into the party, but it is a very clear reference to the character of Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And he goes on to tell Oliver that, you know, this is the dream that you are never going to be able to achieve, and this kind of thing. So I thought that was a really beautiful kind of way to introduce both the plot and the Shakespearean reference kind of at the same time through that reference. And for me, things like A Midsummer Night's Dream they remind me very much of kind of the stagnant or timeless manner of country houses and summer, because Saltburn is obviously throughout the summer. And I remember being at school, I remember being at university, and the summers, it felt like time stood still. It felt like you were in this world that was completely separate from the main day-to-day world. You were kind of in this holding space between college, or university or high school, where you had no responsibilities, you had nothing to do other than enjoy yourself. And it was like a period of indulgence, pure and simple indulgence. And that's kind of how it feels with A Midsummer Night's Dream, because obviously there's that whole thing about being in a dream world and being in a state of not quite being in reality, but not quite being separate from it as well. And so I liked the fact that for me, it reminded me of that. And you get that kind of sense as well at country houses. I mean, the country house itself was always used, certainly from kind of like the 1700s onwards, as a country retreat, as somewhere for a elite family to be able to kind of step back from society, from the public, from the real world, and be able to step into this kind of timeless place where time doesn't mean anything, and there's no instant kind of draws on your time. There's no requirements of what you do. Like it's a play place. It's somewhere for an elite family to come and rest and recuperate and have fun and step away from all of the responsibilities. And obviously, I'm not going to go into all of the kind of like country house stuff, because obviously a country house is run by staff and servants, and it relies on income from local farms and from local land renting, and all that kind of stuff would need to be overseen by somebody. But increasingly in country houses, and especially in Saltburn itself, you get the impression that this kind of army of staff in the background are the ones that manage all the responsibilities, and the main family are able to just exist and to do what they want. And so again, it reminded me of that kind of static, just not being influenced by time and not being influenced by the outside world, and almost being in this kind of like dream world where anything can happen. And that's again why I thought it was a really nice parallel to draw with A Midsummer Night's Dream. I may be reading a little bit too much into that, but for me, that's what I saw when I saw the film and saw the Midsummer Night's Dream references. So yeah, I really love that there was kind of the visual reference in there, as well as kind of like the plot reference from, like say, Brideshead Revisited and The Talented Mr. Ripley. Emerald Fennel is bringing in these literary references in lots of different formats. You're getting kind of the plot one, you're getting the visual one, and I think that's just really, really genius and really, really clever to think about how to do these different literary references. So with the Greek mythology, like I say, we've got the Minotaur in the centre of the maze, and we've got Theseus who battled the Minotaur. Now, there's kind of two really kind of interesting kind of mythology references, I think, with the Minotaur and with Theseus. And the first is that when Felix has died and he's laying on the ground, it's almost like Theseus is battling the Minotaur for his son's life. So not quite as real as actually fighting the Minotaur, but almost like battling that kind of death situation and trying to almost like bargain with the Minotaur for his son's life. And also alongside that, the fact that the Minotaur in Greek mythology required human sacrifices. Felix has literally been killed in front of the Minotaur, and so you can almost see that as like a sacrifice as well. And then there was a little bit more of a, I suppose, again, maybe reading too much into this, but a bit more of a kind of an abstract reference, which is that Venetia says a couple of times to Oliver that Oliver is just one of many, and that Felix brings these kind of poor, maybe like lonely or like economically poor characters, people from Oxford back to Saltburn on a regular basis. And Venetia mentions that, and I think that is, we find out that those kind of relationships, they never last, those friendships never last, and inevitably Felix either gets bored of them or they fall out, and then the next year Felix is looking for another person to bring to Saltburn. And it kind of makes me think of that as another form of sacrifice to the Minotaur. Obviously, Felix brings in this person, and that person is almost devoured by Saltburn and by his family and by the sheer wealth that is on display and the kind of conspicuous consumption of Saltburn. And so I thought that was quite interesting. You know, does Felix bring these people to Saltburn almost to sacrifice them to Saltburn and his family? And what is he getting out of that? Because he does come across as like a nice character, does Felix, but there's definitely kind of a slight negative undertone. There's definitely a cruel kind of consumptive quality to to Felix, that he likes to consume somebody. He likes to have somebody wholly for themselves, but when he's finished with them, he's quite happy to just let them go and let them drop. And we do see that he does that with Oliver later on, although of course that totally backfires, because in the end, Oliver is the one that kills Felix. So I like that kind of twisting of that narrative. And like I say, it did make me wonder whether there was that kind of sacrificial element with Felix. Yeah, I'll leave the Greek kind of mythology there for now, because it's probably the limit of my knowledge, but I'd love to chat about it further. You know, I'm always kind of having chats with people in the comments. If you've got some knowledge, let me know and we can have a chat about it. So the next one is a very quick one, and it's basically the doppelganger Shelley reference, and I'm only including it because they are talking about Percy Shelley, who is a poet, and they're talking about the fact that Shelley saw his own doppelganger before he died, and an hour later he saw his doppelganger pass in front of the window, and then an hour later he was dead. And there is a beautiful moment, and I'm so proud of myself because I spotted this first time around. I know there's a lot of people who didn't spot this in the film and then saw it on TikTok later and were like, how did I miss that? I didn't miss it. I saw it straight away. Basically, Venetia is telling the story about Percy Shelley and how he saw his own doppelganger. And they're all sat at the dining table. Felix is sat next to Venetia with his back to the window, and he's in like a salmon-coloured shirt. And as the camera is pointed at Venetia and she's telling the story about Percy Shelley's doppelganger, Felix walks past the window in his salmon-coloured shirt. And so we see his doppelganger. So I saw that and I was like, well, that's Felix's doppelganger. Oh my God, Felix is going to die. And so I knew at that point that that was foreshadowing what was going to happen later in the film. And I just thought it was a really beautiful moment. In fact, this is my favourite moment in the entire film because it brings you as the viewer into the film, because nobody else sees Felix's doppelganger. Nobody mentions it at the table. There isn't like anybody facing the window who says, oh my God, I've just seen Felix. That moment is purely and simply in the film for the viewer. It doesn't break the fourth wall because nobody looks into the camera, but it kind of invites you to view something that nobody else in the film is seeing, none of the characters. And so you become witness to something, you are drawn into it in a way that you're not when you just sit down and watch a film. Most of the time we watch a film and we're not really drawn into it in that way. We're not seeing something that any other characters are not seeing. The only other kind of similar parallel that I could draw was in The Haunting of Hill House, where they had the ghosts in the background, and it was only after the first couple of episodes were released that people started talking about seeing these kind of hidden ghosts in the TV show, and then everybody started noticing them. And that was another kind of way to draw in the viewers, to make them part of the kind of discovery of ghosts and the discovery of what the paranormal activity was at Hill House. And I feel like that was the same with Saltburn, drawing us in, like that literally being a nod to us about what was happening and a way to draw us into the storyline. So I just thought that was beautiful. Like I say, my favourite moment in the entire film, and also a literary reference, which is always very nice as well. And the final reference is one that it's a visual and it's a plot one in the same time. However, I do think that this is maybe a bit of a stretch. So we are, of course, talking about the Harry Potter references throughout Saltburn. Now, these are visually, Harry Potter, the final book, The Deathly Hallows, is used as a visual cue as to telling us what time of year or what year it is within Saltburn. So the idea is it's the early noughties, and The Deathly Hallows has just been released, and so all the characters, I think all the characters read it. Definitely Venetia and Felix read it. And so it's used visually to give us a sense of place and time for the narrative, but there are a couple of plot kind of points as well that people are seeing, and I'm not sure about some, and I have my own theory, which I haven't seen anybody else talk about. Somebody else may have talked about it, but I just haven't seen any videos about it at the moment. So the one that everybody's talking about at the moment is the fact of the 6 stars that are on Oliver and Venetia's hands in the film. So they have 6 stars that are on their hand as a tattoo, and people are saying that those reference the stars that are within the books. So if you look at the books, at the top, there are 3 stars on one page and 3 stars on another page. And a lot of people are saying that those stars on Venetia and Oliver's hands represent kind of the 6 stars that are in the book. And they also say that they represent the 6 Harry Potter books, because at that point, the 7th had only just come out, so they wouldn't have had time to have the 7th star tattooed on their hands. I'm not sure. I know an awful lot of people who got star tattoos in the noughties. And I think it was just one of those things. It was like if people were going to get some kind of random throwaway tattoo, they got stars. And star tattoos may have another random meaning altogether. I mean, my first thought when I saw it was it reminded me of the Seven Sisters of the Pleiades star constellation. But I wouldn't know why Oliver and Venetia would have that on their hand. And obviously there are only 6 stars and there are 7 stars in that constellation. So I don't know. I don't know about the stars. Let me know if you have any other knowledge about what star tattoos mean. And let me know whether you believe that. I think it's a little bit too much of a stretch. But I've stretched things and I'm about to stretch it further with my own Harry Potter theory. So I'm not judging anyone for finding Harry Potter references within this film. So my theory is about the Horcruxes. So in the Deathly Hallows, Oliver, sorry. Another male character. Harry Potter is obviously hunting down the Horcruxes and trying to destroy them in order to destroy Voldemort. And I thought that it's very interesting that in Saltburn there are 7 people who have to be done away with or disappeared in order for Oliver to be able to get to Saltburn and to get possession of Saltburn. So bear with me here. Let me put my coffee down. I need my hands. So we have Felix, we have Farley, we have Venetia, we have Felix's mother, we have the father, and then we have Oliver's 2 parents. 7 people in Oliver's life who need to disappear before Oliver can take possession of Saltburn. Now, he doesn't kill his parents, but everybody else dies. That's 4 characters that die. Farley doesn't die in actual death, but he dies a social death in that he is completely stripped of any connection with the family and told to leave. And so in a way, he suffers one form of demise. And obviously Oliver's parents don't actually die, but he has pretended that his father is dead and he cuts himself off from his parents. He visits once with Felix, which is when it's obviously revealed that he's middle class. He's not actually from the lower classes of Liverpool. His parents don't have any issue with addiction. His parents are actually very, very middle class. After that, we don't see him visit his parents again. And I think from that, we are to assume that he cut them off and pretended that they never existed again. So that's 7 people that Oliver needed to get rid of in order to ascend to his role as a lord, potentially, or not in title, because of course that's not the way the titles would have worked, but in fortune, in position, in the fact that he could live the life of a lord at Saltburn. So what do you think? Am I reaching too much in my theory here? Is it a bit too much of a stretch? So yes, I am going to leave that there. Those are all of the references that I found. Let me know, like I said, if you want a more in-depth review of Saltburn, if you want me to go into more depth on any of the literary references. Like I say, I feel like you could talk for hours and hours and hours about Saltburn. But let me know. I think it also gives us a really great case study for how to write a country house film and how to write this kind of gothic, literary, not period drama, but kind of at the same time film. So if you're a scriptwriter, if you are a film creator or aspiring to be either, then this is definitely a film you need to watch in order to learn about plotting and everything, really, the whole production. Just absolute triumph. Huge congratulations to Emerald Fennel for creating such an amazing film. And yeah, I'm going to leave it there. So if you're not already subscribed, please do consider subscribing to the channel. I do videos like this looking at films, period dramas, book reviews, and I also do day in the life of a writer content. I am a published author myself and I am an aspiring novelist. I'm writing my first novel at the moment, so I'm sharing videos about my kind of experience with that and anything else really, anything, little vlogs around my life. I do the odd day out review, so if I go to a historic site or go to a country house, I do little review videos. So yeah, if that kind of thing sounds like your bag and you're not already subscribed, then please do. If you've watched this to the end, and I know that there's a couple of you that do, especially my lovely patrons, then put a bathtub. Is there a bathtub emoji? I feel like there's a bathtub emoji. If there's not, right, either a bathtub emoji or a grave emoji. Put one of those in the comments if you've made it this far. And on the subject of Patreon, I do have a Patreon set up. It's one fee per month. I don't have a tiered situation. So if you would like to support the work that I do and help me create more of these videos, then please do consider becoming a patron. And huge thank you to all of my patrons at the moment. And I look forward to welcoming more of you to our family. Okay, right, I am going to leave this here. I will speak to you very soon and I will see you in the next video. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.